Hi. Let's talk about that exciting topic. Power of attorneys versus executor versus beneficiary. Now, there are uses for all three of those things, but you need to understand how they work. For example, when someone has a loved one that passes, they'll often bring a power of attorney to the bank. Guess what? Power of attorney expires when someone dies, so that won't work. So let's talk about what is a power of attorney. A power of attorney is used in the state where the person lives, and they have to have it notarized, where they give someone the power to make decisions. Typically, in the power of attorney form, you may choose that they get full power on everything, or you may give them, for example, financial power to deal with your finances, or it might be to deal with a property like a home. Or again, just give them access to everything. Now, what that is used for is if you become incapacitated or ill and you are not able to make decisions. So perhaps you are so sick that you're in a coma, or perhaps you're not in a coma, but you can't deal with paying the bills. So the first thing you should think about is who do you want to have that power of attorney? Typically, if you're married and you trust your spouse, you would want your spouse to have a power of attorney for yourself and vice versa. So if one gets sick, the other one can make any decisions or sign any paperwork on your behalf. The next choice is typically an adult child, or it might be another relative. And they would have the power to deal with things if you were so sick, or maybe you have dementia, then someone else can make all the decisions and sign all the paperwork. They typically can sign checks out of a checking account or other things. They do need to sign their own name and then write underneath it POA for whoever it's for. So again, there is a great use for a power of attorney. You cannot wait until someone is incapacitated because they need to sign it in the presence of a notary. So everyone should have a power of attorney in place. Okay. Secondly, there is an executor position. It is not the same thing. An executor is named in a will when someone passes away. That executor is in charge of the person's accounts, like closing them, making sure that what the will states gets done. For example, if it needs to be distributed to people, or perhaps it's selling a house or a property, and then getting those proceeds to who is to get those proceeds. Now, an executor might also have to open an estate account, which is a bank account with its own uh, EIN, or sort of like a social security number, but it's a number that they use to file the final taxes, to report any income, etc. So again, that's what they would use. Now, you could also use a trust. I'm not an attorney, but if you want to set up a trust, then you go ahead and set up a trust. Most people, if they don't own more than one property, do not need to do a trust. Typically, one property could be put in what they call a deed on death, so that you file a deed with the county that says, upon my death, I want my children to get my house, and that will get recorded. So you can do it a couple of the different ways if you don't need such control of the funds, and also consult with a tax attorney on what taxes would be due if you have a trust. So understand how that works by getting some good advice. Okay. Thirdly, there is a role for beneficiaries. So if you don't have a lot of property and you don't have a trust, you might want to put beneficiaries on your bank account. How that works is you usually get to put on a first primary beneficiary, which is typically your spouse, and then you get to put on secondary beneficiaries, which means if something happens to my spouse, then I want my adult children to get the proceeds of the account. This is the simplest way to pass on funds from an account. So you don't need to specify in a will that you want the children to get that savings account. the bank will go ahead once you present the death certificate and they will cut the checks for the number of beneficiaries. They will divide it for you, like into fourths or into thirds, depending on how many beneficiaries there are. So those are all tools. You can use a power of attorney for someone who is living and needs help. You can use the executor position that you name in your will of who you want to handle things after you pass, or you can also use beneficiaries on your account or like a deed on death on your property so that all of that gets passed automatically once you die. As always, I want to provide you the skinny on scams and help you and educate you about banking and financial issues. Look at my other videos. Bye.